Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. This is the story of how I disappeared without a trace, and how the woman who broke me somehow found me again. The ring never sank. I stood there for 20 minutes, waiting for it to vanish beneath the water. It just floated, mocking me in slow circles, catching glints of sunlight like a tiny lyre clinging to the surface. I wanted it to drown, like I did, but it wouldn't go down. I don't remember walking to the end of that pier. I remember the heat, the screaming in my chest, the tremble in my fingers when I took the ring off. Our ring, the one she said she'd wear, even if the world burned. Yeah, that one. There wasn't a single splash when I threw it. Just silence. People around me were taking photos of seagulls, licking ice cream, laughing like the world made sense. No one saw a man unraveling in slow motion, holding a secret in his throat that tasted like metal and guilt. You want to know what I saw on her phone? You won't believe it. I didn't believe it. It wasn't just messages, it was a full scrapbook. Photos, videos, voice notes. She didn't just cheat. She archived it, categorized it, smiled in every frame. And the worst part? He wore my clothes, my hoodie, my Christmas sweater from last year. The one she said she hated. Turns out she loved it, just not on me. I didn't scream, I didn't smash anything, I didn't cry in front of her. I just turned off, like a switch. She thought I was going to the gas station. I left my wallet on the counter, my phone on the stairs, my keys in the freezer. I did it all on purpose. I wanted her to think I'd gone crazy. I guess, in a way, I had. The first night I slept in a train station. The second in the back of a rental car I never planned to return. I changed my name before I changed my socks. I didn't want closure. I wanted distance. But you know what no one tells you about disappearing? It doesn't matter how far you run if she still knows how to find you. I thought I'd be safe in Oaktown, a nothing little dot on the map where the most exciting event was the annual antique tractor pull and half the stores still closed on Sundays. I found a tiny attic apartment above a hardware shop run by a man named Curtis, who only asked one question during the lease signing. You running from something or someone? I smiled and said, yes. He nodded like that made perfect sense. No ID check. No deposit. Just keys and silence. That's where I stayed for 10 months. My days were slow and quiet, stacking shelves, refilling paint, trying not to exist too loudly. I lived on gas station sandwiches and wrote bad poetry on receipts. I didn't talk to anyone unless I had to. I was finally invisible. And then someone knocked on my door. At first, I ignored it. No one ever came to the third floor. Curtis was too lazy to climb those stairs, and everyone else thought it was storage. But the knocking didn't stop. It came again the next morning, then the next night. Soft at first, then louder, slower, more deliberate. I didn't open it. I didn't breathe. I just pressed my ear to the door, heart pounding, convinced the past had finally grown legs and learned how to knock. Then, 2 days later, the knocking stopped, but a note slid under the door. One line, written in the handwriting I knew better than my own. I know you're in there. I don't need the door. I'll wait. I should have run. I should have packed up and disappeared all over again. But I froze. And in that stillness, everything began to crumble. She didn't knock again. Instead, I started finding little things. A coffee cup from the shop we used to go to, sitting on the steps. A Polaroid photo of my old backyard taped to my window. One of my childhood books, The Wind in the Willows, left at the base of my door, the cover worn, the inside inscribed in her handwriting, "You still disappear like mole." How did she even find me? I changed everything, my name, my face even. I shaved the beard, I dyed my hair, I erased myself, and yet she carved her way back in like ivy through brick. And then came the worst part. She didn't want to apologize. She wanted to explain. She didn't show up in the middle of the night. No dramatic pounding on the door, no sobbing confessions in the rain. She came on a Monday, in broad daylight, wearing sunglasses too big for her face, and holding a grocery bag like she was stopping by to drop off soup. I watched from the crack in the blinds, my breath caught in my throat like a stone. I hadn't said her name out loud in almost a year, but there she was, alive, casual, real. For a second, I honestly believed it was a hallucination, my brain pulling one final cruel joke. She didn't look broken, she looked energized. Her hair was longer, darker. her skin tan like she'd spent the last 12 months somewhere bright. I'd imagined her suffering, crumbling, drowning in regret. Instead, she looked like someone who had just returned from a vacation in a version of life I was never invited to. I didn't open the door, but I heard her voice, calm, unshaken. "I brought you something," she said through the wood, like we were old friends chatting through a dorm room. "It's not what you think." I wanted to yell, to scream through the door that I didn't want her things, or her voice, or the way her shadow moved across the floor, but I just stood there, quiet, listening. She left the bag. I waited a full hour before opening it. Inside was a tattered manila envelope and a single orange. I stared at the fruit longer than I care to admit. I hadn't eaten an orange since the night I found her photos. The scent alone made my eyes sting. The envelope was worse. Inside were printed emails, dozens of them, pages and pages of digital ink. Conversations between her and someone named C. Not Elliot, not the man from the bookstore. This was someone else entirely, someone older, married. A name I didn't recognize until I read the line. "I know you said you wanted to leave him, but be smart about it. Get what you can first." The date, 3 months before I left. My knees buckled. This wasn't a love affair. This was a transaction, a scheme. And I was the idiot holding the receipt. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at the edge of the bed, staring at that orange like it might offer answers. The envelope lay open beside it, its contents scattered like bones across the floor. Every email was worse than the last. Not just because of what they said, but because of how casual she sounded in all of them. Like I wasn't real. Like I was some character she was preparing to write out of a script she never believed in to begin with. The man she was writing to, Carson, he wasn't young, he wasn't charming. Based on his tone, he was cold, calculating. A spreadsheet in human form. The emails talked about things I hadn't even realized were gone. My life insurance policy, the value of our house, a second storage unit I didn't know she rented. There was even mention of my old retirement account from my first job, one I forgot existed. She hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She'd prepared to erase me financially. I left the apartment at sunrise. I walked with no destination, only motion. My legs felt mechanical, like the grief had gotten bored and handed the controls to autopilot. I ended up back at the pier. The ring was gone now, finally. Maybe someone took it. Maybe it sank. I didn't care. All I saw was the water, the same way I left it, indifferent. I stayed out all day. When I returned, there was something new on my doorstep. A small box, no note, just a cassette tape. An actual tape. Who even uses those anymore? I almost threw it out. But curiosity is poison wrapped in paper. Curtis still had an old cassette player in the back of the shop. I asked to borrow it. He didn't ask why, just handed it to me with a grunt and a weird look. Back in my room, I sat cross-legged on the floor and clicked play. Static. Then her voice, not like I remembered. Not like she'd sounded outside my door. It was younger, shakier. She was crying. "If anything happens to me, this is why. He promised me everything. He said he'd make it clean. I didn't know what he meant until it was too late." I paused the tape. Who was she talking about? What did she think was going to happen? What did I run from? And what was coming back? I played the tape 3 more times that night. Not because I was confused, but because I didn't want to miss a single breath. Her voice cracked in places I'd never heard before. Not during our worst arguments. Not when I told her I was leaving. Not even in the messages she left after I disappeared. This wasn't guilt. This was fear. The kind that seeps through skin and settles in the bones. At the end of the tape, there was silence. A long, dragging silence. And then a whisper. I had to turn the volume all the way up to hear it. Tell him about the house. He'll know which one. But I didn't. I didn't know anything. That was the problem. I sat there in that attic room, surrounded by receipts of my own ignorance. Too exhausted to cry and too bitter to scream. What house? Where? When? I was about to give up, to toss the tape across the room and pretend this was all some dramatic performance she'd cooked up to twist the knife a little deeper, when I noticed something. Tucked between the emails and the envelope was a photo I hadn't seen before. Black and white, faded. A small brick house with ivy climbing the left wall and a crooked porch swing that looked like it hadn't moved in years. On the back, in her handwriting, were 5 words. You were always right here. I don't know why I knew it, but I did. That house was in Millstone, a town 2 hours away. I remembered passing it once during a road trip in our 3rd year of marriage. I had joked that it looked like a haunted postcard. She had laughed, too hard. Then changed the subject. We never spoke about it again. Until now. I should have walked away, thrown the photo in the river and locked the past where it belonged. But something in me, a sick, shaky piece that still wanted to understand, started driving before I even packed a bag. Millstone was quiet, colder than I remembered. The streets were empty, the kind of place where time slows down, not because it's peaceful, but because it's forgotten. And the house, still standing, still crooked, still waiting. The front door was unlocked. Inside, it smelled like dust and old fabric. The air was heavy, like it knew I didn't belong. And there, on the kitchen table, was another envelope. No name, no address, just one word, written in red ink. Run. I didn't run. I should have. Every instinct told me to. But when you've spent so long numb, so long hiding from everything, including yourself, fear feels almost comforting. At least it proves something's real. So I sat in that crooked kitchen, staring at that one word scrawled in red. Run. The ink was smeared slightly like someone had written it fast, or with shaking hands. There was no electricity in the house, no humming fridge, no warm pipes, no distant click of a thermostat, just the occasional creak of old wood shifting in place. I moved from room to room like I was in a dream I'd forgotten I had. Every floorboard betrayed me with sound. Upstairs, the bedrooms were empty, just dust outlines where furniture used to be. One of the closets had children's drawings taped inside, yellowed stick figures and shaky hearts. But it was the basement door that stopped me. It was cracked open just enough to reveal darkness beyond it, deeper than the rest of the house. A smell floated up from below, metallic, damp, like rust and rainwater. For a long time, I just stood there, one hand on the wall, trying to convince myself I didn't need to know what was down there. And then I heard it. A noise. Not loud, but definite. Something shifted beneath the floor. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, an old broom with a cracked handle, and descended the stairs. They groaned beneath my weight. Halfway down, my foot slipped on something soft. A pile of cloth. No, shirts, men's shirts, neatly folded, all the same size. At the bottom of the stairs, I saw the table. Wooden, scratched. A single chair pulled out slightly, like someone had left in a hurry. On the table sat a box, plain, black, dustless. Inside it was a stack of Polaroids, and in every one of them, me. Different angles, different days. Some were from before I left her, some after. One of them was taken at the pier, the one where I threw the ring. I dropped the photos. Behind me, a voice, familiar, cold, spoke. You were supposed to disappear, not start digging. I didn't turn around right away. Something about the voice made my spine lock up, not because I recognized it, but because I almost did, like a tune you can hum but can't place. I stood frozen, staring at the Polaroids scattered across the concrete floor. My face stared back at me from different corners of my life. Some I didn't even remember living. I picked one up, hands trembling. It showed me asleep on a bus, head pressed against the window, sunlight cutting across my cheek. That trip was 3 towns ago. I had no phone, no ID. I paid cash. How had someone followed me? The voice spoke again. You were never supposed to go back to the house. That was her mistake. I finally turned. He wasn't what I expected. Middle-aged, calm, like someone's uncle who worked in logistics. He wore a windbreaker and held nothing threatening. Just a phone in one hand and something that looked like a leather notebook in the other. His expression wasn't angry. It was disappointed, like I'd failed a test I didn't know I was taking. I managed to say, "Who are you?" But the words felt clumsy, like my mouth wasn't sure how to form them anymore. He stepped forward slowly, avoiding the photos on the floor like they were sacred. You think this is about infidelity? About some woman who broke your heart and made you disappear. Number. This was about control. You were the easiest variable. The one who would run none of it made sense. I backed up against the wall, the broom still clutched in my fist like a child holding a toy sword. You're not the first, he continued. You're just the first who came back. The others followed instructions. They vanished and stayed gone. You left breadcrumbs I couldn't breathe. What do you mean the others? He tossed the notebook onto the table. Read it, or don't. But if you leave this house alive, you don't come back again. Not here, not to her, not to anything that existed before. You've seen enough. That's the only warning you'll get. Then he walked past me, up the stairs, and out the door, like this was just another Monday in his calendar. I stood there for a long time, the notebook untouched, the smell of damp earth tightening around me like a noose. I knew that if I opened it, nothing about my life would ever make sense again. But I opened it anyway. And what I found inside made me realize this hadn't started with Marla. It had started with me. The notebook wasn't long, just 13 pages, but each one cracked my understanding of my own life wide open. It wasn't a diary or a confession, it was a log. A cold, clinical breakdown of every major decision I'd made in the past 5 years. What I said, what I didn't, what I should have, who I was monitored by, where I went when I thought I was alone. Some entries included timestamps, others reflections. But one sentence repeated again and again, like a warning etched into the margins. He is perfect for dissociation. I wasn't supposed to find that house. I wasn't supposed to hear the tape. And I definitely wasn't supposed to stay alive long enough to read that notebook. My entire breakdown, my disappearance, was designed, engineered, and I'd walked right into it. But here's the twist they didn't plan for. Marla didn't betray me, at least not in the way I thought. Her affair, the emails, even the photos, they were planted. Real events, but manipulated. Her tears on the tape were real. She had tried to get out. The house wasn't a trap for me. It was where she left the only truth she had, hoping I'd be the one to find it. She had been scared because she realized too late what she'd been pulled into, and I was the only person she believed might still care enough to uncover it. I never saw the man in the windbreaker again. I left the house that night and drove until sunrise burned the fear out of my chest. I tossed the notebook into a river 3 towns over. I didn't want it anymore. I didn't need proof. I needed peace. 2 months later, I moved west. I live by the coast now. I teach kids how to build kites. No one knows my name, not the one she used to whisper or the one on that notebook. Just me, a guy who vanished and learned how to breathe again. The past still knocks sometimes, quietly. But I don't answer anymore. I exist now, fully, messily, honestly. And that's more than I ever thought I'd have. Thanks for watching this story on Reddit Confessions. Now it's your turn. Tell us in the comments. What's the most mysterious or unbelievable event you've ever heard about in real life? Something with hidden letters, a long-lost friend, or a truth that came out years later? We'd love to hear your stories. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, raw confessions. Until next time.